In Log Town, the infamous pirate Gold Roger is led onto a platform to be executed under the watch of Marine Vice Admiral Garp. Before the execution, a person in the crowd asks Roger where he left his treasure known as the One Piece. Roger replies that he left it for someone to find it right before he gets stabbed by the executioners. The crowd rushes away to start searching while Roger laughs, marking the beginning of the Great Pirate Era. 22 years later, Luffy is in a small dinghy boat, telling a bird about his dream to find the One Piece, sail the Grand Line, and become king of the pirates. Unfortunately, the boat is quickly getting flooded, so Luffy gets inside a barrel that drifts away after the boat sinks. The barrel eventually floats in the middle of two ships going through a naval battle. A group of pirates led by Captain Alvida is attacking a passenger boat, and in the middle of the fight, Luffy's barrel is recovered and brought aboard. The passengers aren't ready for a fight, and after a few quick moves, Alvida's crew easily takes over. Then Alvida demands to know the location of the bounty hunter Zoro, who she believes is after her bounty. A passenger reveals that they took Zoro to Sixus Island, but Alvida's wasn't on Zoro's list. This enrages Alvida, who immediately kills the man and orders cabin boy Kobe to clean up. Later in the evening, Kobe is cleaning below deck when suddenly Luffy bursts out of his barrel. Kobe screams in fright, forcing Luffy to silence him. After learning about the Alvida pirates, Luffy reveals that he's a pirate as well, which surprises Kobe because Luffy is nice. Luffy says that not all pirates are violent and tells him a story from his childhood. Luffy grew up in Windmill Village, which was often visited by the Red Hair Pirates and their captain Shanks, who Luffy looked up to. Luffy wanted to join them, but Shanks kept turning him down. Luffy tried to prove his toughness, but that only gave him a scar under his eye. Once everyone is sleeping, the duo sneaks above deck and goes up to the helm where Luffy grabs an oar, but swinging it accidentally hits a bell and wakes up the crew. Alvida confronts Luffy, thinking he's a bounty hunter, but Luffy insults her and causes her to attack them in rage. The rest of Alvida's crew jumps into battle as well, and one of them shoots Luffy, only for his body to absorb the bullet and throw it back. Luffy then reveals that his superpower is a body made of rubber, and he uses it to dodge all the pirates' attacks while easily winning the fight. In the struggle, a raging Alvida accidentally sets the ship on fire and blames Kobe, so she tries to kill him. However, Luffy takes the blow with his head before stretching his arm far back and snapping it toward Alvida, sending her overboard. Her crew immediately surrenders, and Luffy tells Kobe to get a boat and rations so they can leave. Meanwhile, on Sixus Island, Zoro is approached by Mr. Seven to invite him to join a society of assassins. Zoro dismisses his offer and insults Seven, who immediately attacks with his swords. Zoro defends himself with his own swords and his great skill, making it easy for him to cut Seven at the waist, killing him. The next day, Luffy and Kobe are sailing on a small boat, and Kobe asks how Luffy's body can stretch. Luffy explains that 10 years ago, he was with the Red Hair Pirates at a bar and decided to check their treasure chests. He found a small box with an unusual fruit inside and didn't hesitate to eat it. At that moment, Bandit Higuma and his gang came into the bar and demanded drinks, but the bartender informed them that she was sold out. Shanks offered Higuma the last bottle, but Higuma responded by breaking it over the counter. However, Shanks didn't take the bait and simply started cleaning up, causing Higuma to break even more things before leaving. Luffy called Shanks a coward for not fighting back, and when he tried to storm out of the bar, Shanks grabbed him by the arm. To everyone's shock, Luffy's arm stretched and Shank instantly knew the boy ate a devil fruit, which granted people a special power but also made it impossible for them to swim. Then Luffy asks Kobe about his dream, and Kobe admits that he wants to become a Marine. Luffy decides they'll go to a Marine base so Kobe can join and he can get a map to the Grand Line. Not far from there, Nami is stuck on a boat with nothing but a treasure chest and is approached by two pirates. She asks for their help, and the pirates jump on the boat to check the chest, only to find it empty. It has all been an act from Nami, who jumps on their ship and sails away. Sometime later, Luffy and Kobe land at Shell's town and go to a bar where Zoro and Nami are too. While Nami flirts with a Marine officer, the bartender's daughter tries to offer Zoro a snack, but she accidentally bumps into Helmeppo, the son of an important Marine captain. Helmeppo takes offense and knocks her snacks to the ground to smash them with his feet, but Zoro cuts in and eats the snack before asking Helmeppo to apologize to the girl. Helmeppo responds with his word and a fight ensues, which soon grows into a full bar brawl. Luffy is impressed by the way Zoro easily defeats everyone with just the hilts of his swords, while Nami uses the distraction to knock down the officer and steal his uniform. Zoro corners Helmeppo, who offers to take Zoro to see his father for a deal. At the Marina base, Zoro meets Captain Morgan and asks for the bounty on Mr. Seven. However, Morgan says that attacking Marines is a crime with a punishment of 7 days imprisonment. If Zoro doesn't turn himself in, he'll no longer be able to collect bounties, so Zoro agrees to be imprisoned. Meanwhile, Luffy wants to break into the Marine base and gets an idea when he sees a sewer pipe. The next morning, a tied-up Zoro is confronted by Helmeppo, who taunts Zoro with his own swords while revealing that Morgan has no intention of freeing him after the 7 days are over. At that moment, Luffy climbs out of a sewer grate and comes across Zoro, so he asks him to join his crew. Zoro refuses, and when Luffy asks about his dream, Zoro reveals he wants to become the world's greatest swordsman. Impressed, Luffy unties Zoro before going back into the sewer. Inside the base, Nami uses the stolen uniform to sneak in unnoticed. When she enters the library, an officer asks her what she's doing there, and Nami claims that Morgan sent her to find a map of the Grand Line. The officer says that's impossible because important maps are locked away in Morgan's office, but before Nami can respond, the officer she stole from appears. Nami immediately takes out her staff and quickly knocks them both out with great skill. At that moment, Luffy falls out of a grate in the ceiling, so Nami keeps up her lie and tries to arrest him, but Luffy heard everything and follows her out so they can steal the map together. Meanwhile, Helmeppo is in his room playing with the stolen swords when Zoro suddenly breaks in. Helmeppo asks if he's going to kill him, but Zoro responds that he'll do something worse. Back to Luffy, he and Nami suddenly run into Morgan, but Nami pretends she's an officer taking Luffy to his cell and Morgan believes them. As he leaves, Nami manages to steal his keys and Luffy says that she should join his crew, but she rejects him because she hates pirates. The duo break into Morgan's office, and as they look for the map, Luffy accidentally triggers a switch that causes a safe to appear on the floor. In the library, Morgan finds the wounded officers and learns the truth about Nami, so he sounds the alarm. Then Morgan goes to his office and uses his axe hand to break down the door. Without enough time to open the safe, Luffy uses his power to pull it out, and the sudden force launches him and Nami out the window. The guards outside confront the duo, triggering another fight. Zoro is on his way out when he sees the battle and decides to join as well, and it's easy for all three of them to overpower all the officers. However, Morgan soon arrives and he's much stronger, so Luffy and Zoro must work together while Nami handles the guards. Zoro reveals his three-sword style and uses it to hold down Morgan's axe hand, allowing Luffy to launch a stretched kick that strikes Morgan in the face, defeating him. Afterward, Zoro uses his great strength to pick up the safe and takes it to Nami's boat. The trio gets ready to escape together, but at that moment Helmeppo appears, revealing that Zoro mangled his hair, and tries to arrest them. However, Kobe arrives and knocks him out first. Kobe isn't leaving with them because he's joining the Marines. Luffy respects that and leaves after calling Kobe his friend. Meanwhile, Garp receives a call telling him that the map to the Grand Line has been stolen. At the same time, Kabaji brings the same news to his captain Buggy, who promises to get the map for himself. Later on the ship, Luffy thinks about his childhood. One day while he was testing his powers in the bar, Shanks suddenly arrived with his crew asking for months' worth of rations. Luffy asked him when he'd be returning, but Shanks said he wouldn't. Then Luffy starts bothering Nami while she tries to open Morgan's safe. She pushes Luffy and almost causes his straw hat to blow overboard, so Luffy tells her to not threaten the hat because it's his most cherished possession. After Nami finally opens the safe and finds the map of the Grand Line, they're suddenly attacked by an approaching ship, which fires shots that spread a red gas around them. The gas causes the trio to start losing consciousness, so Luffy makes sure to swallow the map first. Sometime later, the trio wakes up inside a wooden crate, which is soon taken down to leave them in the middle of a circus performance by Buggy's crew. The circus is attended by citizens who have been chained to their seats in order to do what appears on cue cards. Then Buggy makes his entrance, saying he wants the map. To distract him, Nami shows off Luffy's power saying he could perform, then runs out of the tent. Outside, she's shocked to discover that the town has been utterly demolished by Buggy's crew, and the pirates catch up to her to capture her. Buggy orders for Zoro and Nami to be taken away while he interrogates Luffy about the map. In Shell's town, Garp arrives at the base, where Morgan explains what happened but lies about the details to look good. Later, Kobe is summoned to Garp's office, where he's called a mole because he was seen around with Luffy. Kobe explains Luffy just freed him from Alvida and that his dream is to be a marine and bring pirates like Luffy to justice. Garp accepts the answer and tells Kobe they'll capture Luffy together. Afterward, Garp ties Morgan up in front of all his officers as punishment for lying, then announces they'll concentrate on hunting down Luffy. Back in the circus, Zoro has been tied to a wheel while Nami is locked up in a birdcage. While Nami tries using a lockpick to open the cage, Kabaji comes in and introduces himself to Zoro, revealing that he killed his brother for the bounty. Zoro doesn't remember Kabaji's brother, which makes Kabaji angry and causes him to start throwing knives at Zoro while he spins around on the wheel. On the main stage, Buggy has Luffy tied to a contraption that stretches his arms and legs all the way across the ring, but this doesn't cause Luffy's rubber body any pain. Suddenly Buggy notices the straw hat and recognizes it as Shanks, revealing that he and Shanks used to be in the same crew and claiming that Shanks betrayed him. Then Buggy tries to make Luffy talk by threatening to put a child in the stretching device. Furious, Luffy manages to pull himself out of his bonds and punches Buggy in the face, which strangely sends his head flying. However, Buggy reveals that he's alive and that he also ate a devil fruit, which gave him the power to separate his body parts at will. Buggy splits off his hand and flies it behind Luffy's head, detonating a gas bomb that knocks Luffy out. Another flashback shows Luffy was at the bar when Higuma and his gang returned demanding to finally get their drinks. Luffy angrily confronted Higuma, causing the bandit to pick him up to punish him. However, Shanks arrived and told Higuma to let Luffy go, but when Higuma refused, Shanks' crew immediately attacked, causing a brawl to break out. They easily overpowered the bandits, but Higuma used the chaos to escape with Luffy on a boat. In the middle of the sea, a massive monster appeared and hit the boat before eating Higuma. Luffy slowly sank into the sea, but Shanks arrived just in time and pulled him out of the water. Then the monster tried to attack again, but Shanks stared at it with no fear, telling it to get lost. This actually worked, and after the monster left, Luffy noticed Shanks lost an arm, but Shanks said Luffy's safety was more important. In the circus, Luffy wakes up inside a glass tank that is slowly filling up with seawater. In the other room, Kabaji hasn't hit Zoro with his knives yet, but one throw loosens up the ropes. With Kabaji's attention on Zoro, Nami manages to pick her way out of the cage and attacks Kabaji, allowing Zoro to break out of the rope and knock Kabaji out. Then the duo retrieves their weapons and returns to the stage, where Nami frees Luffy from the tank by throwing her staff at it to break it. Luffy spits out the map while coughing the seawater from his lungs, and since he runs to grab his hat first, Buggy is able to take the map. Zoro attacks Buggy, but his sword doesn't do any damage because Buggy just keeps splitting his body. Then Buggy separates his whole body into little pieces and flies them around the tent with great force, overwhelming the trio with a bunch of hits. After defeating Zoro and Nami, Buggy pins Luffy to the ground and pierces through the straw hat. However, Luffy notices some empty chests and tells his friends he's got a plan. The trio starts working together to hit Buggy's various body parts, so they fly into the chests, which Nami then closes, preventing Buggy from reassembling himself. Eventually Buggy is reduced to just his head, hands, and feet, and Luffy stretches both his arms back to hit Buggy very hard, making him fly out of the tent and off the island. Then the trio recovers the map and frees all the citizens. Afterward they get ready to leave, and when the locals say goodbye to them, Luffy remembers the last time he saw Shanks. Before Shanks left, Luffy told him he finally accepted he wasn't ready to be a pirate yet, but one day he would be the best. Shanks gave Luffy his straw hat, telling him he could return it once he had become strong. Later on the ship, Nami fixes Luffy's hat before hiding in the cabin, where she pulls out a small device that she uses to call a mysterious person to tell them she's got the map. Sometime later, Luffy reveals he made a pirate flag for the ship, but Nami hates it. Then Zoro comes out of the cabin and says that the hidden compartment under the floorboards, which he mistook for a toilet, is taking on seawater. Nami races to check on her things and discovers her device is now broken. Luffy decides they should get a better ship, and Nami informs him the closest place for that is the Gecko Islands. Meanwhile, Garp invites Kobe to his cabin again to play Go. Kobe loses the first game, causing Garp to say he's too defensive and put up a timer to make Kobe react faster, explaining that's how pirates think. Suddenly Helmeppo comes in and reveals that they found Luffy's flag near the Gecko Islands, so Garp makes plans to head there. Back in the circus, Buggy is working on restoring his body when a mysterious fish person approaches him, saying that Arlong wishes to see Buggy. When Buggy responds by attacking him with a knife, the guy dodges it and punches Buggy to knock him out. Later, Buggy is brought to see Arlong, who demands tribute. Having nothing, Buggy tells Arlong about Luffy and the map, offering his connections to catch him, which Arlong accepts. When the trio arrives at the Gecko Islands, they immediately go to the shipyard, where Luffy instantly falls in love with a huge ship. Suddenly Usopp emerges to tell the trio about it, while a flashback shows that since he was a kid, Usopp would ring the bell and run down the street shouting that pirates are coming to the village. Years ago this caused panic, but eventually the villagers realized he lied and stopped paying attention to him. Usopp tells the trio that the ship isn't for sale, but the whole shipyard is owned by a friend of his, so he takes them to meet her. Soon the group arrives at a giant mansion, where servants Sham and Butchie tell them to leave. However, the owner Kaya arrives with her butler Klahadore and is happy to see her friend Usopp, so she invites everyone to stay for dinner and celebrate her 18th birthday. While the trio tries out new outfits for the dinner, Luffy promises Nami that he'll convince Kaya to give them a ship. Zoro comments that Klahadore looks familiar, but he can't pinpoint why. Meanwhile, Usopp goes to Kaya's room and gives her a birthday present, a rock he claims is a pearl. He also shares another tale of his adventures, which are all lies, but Kaya loves them. Later, Klahadore brings Kaya her tea, which he's made her drink since her parents died and he became her caretaker. Afterward, Klahadore checks the workers in the kitchen to make sure they remember to put the poison in Kaya's soup. When it's time for dinner, the group is joined by family lawyer Mary. Because of her health, Kaya isn't allowed to eat anything but her soup. Before she can taste it, Luffy jumps on the table to make a heartful speech and ask for the ship. When Kaya tries to respond, she starts coughing hard, causing Klahadore to try to kick everyone out. However, Kaya stops him and invites everyone to stay the night. Later in the wine cellar, Mary accuses Klahadore of trying to take control of Kaya's shipyard. Klahadore denies it before he starts moving incredibly fast, surprising Mary from behind and stabbing him with a bladed glove. In the corridors, Luffy is looking for a snack and bumps into Zoro, who wants a drink. They go to the kitchen and find Usopp, who tells them about his friendship with Kaya and the fact his father is a pirate who left when he was young. Then Usopp takes Zoro to the wine cellar to find a drink while Luffy stays to eat all the soup. Meanwhile, Nami is going around stealing valuable items when she suddenly hears a noise. She tries to go back to her room but accidentally ends up entering Kaya's instead. Kaya can tell what Nami is doing, but she doesn't mind and invites her to stay for a chat. The girls end up bonding and Kaya lets Nami keep the things she stole, but on her way out, Nami puts them back. In the wine cellar, Zoro and Usopp find Mary's body. Klahadore shows up with Sham and Butchie and reveals his claws, making Zoro finally realize that Klahadore is the wanted pirate Kuro. Both men immediately start fighting, but Kuro is simply too fast and keeps Zoro busy so that Sham can knock him out from behind. While a terrified Usopp escapes through the window, Sham and Butchie throw Mary, Zoro, and his swords into a well to get rid of the evidence. They don't go after Usopp because they know nobody will believe him. This turns out to be true because Usopp's ringing the bell in the village, but he's ignored. It's then revealed that Usopp began doing this routine because of his belief that his father would be returning for his sick mother, who appreciated her son's gesture before she died. Now Usopp collapses in despair only to suddenly be found by Kobe, who says that he believes him. In the mansion, Nami finds Luffy unconscious and tries to move him, but at that moment the criminals come in, so she hides in the cupboard. The trio finds Luffy too and discusses their plan to kill Kaya to obtain the shipyard, which is overheard by Nami. Suddenly Usopp arrives with Kobe and Helmeppo to accuse Kuro of being a pirate. Kobe can't arrest Kuro without evidence, so Kuro hands Luffy to them to make them leave. Nami uses this chance to come out of the cupboard and knock Sham out before escaping. Seconds later, Kuro and Butchie find Sham in the kitchen, who tells them about Nami. Suddenly midnight finally strikes, and since Kaya is now of age, so Kuro announces it's time to finally kill her. Meanwhile Usopp sneaks into Kaya's bedroom to warn her about Kuro, but she doesn't believe him. Then Nami arrives to prove Usopp's story, explaining Kaya isn't actually sick and it was Kuro's tea that caused it. At that moment, Kuro places the house on security lockdown before the trio goes out to hunt Kaya. This finally makes her believe the story. Usopp, Nami, and Kaya escape through hidden tunnels in the hallways, which is overheard by Kuro. He tries to stab them through the walls, but they dodge the attacks and run away to hide in an old abandoned room. There's another switch here that they try to use to undo the lockdown. This causes the lights to flicker and Kuro guesses their location. Back in the well, Zoro wakes up and begins remembering his childhood. As a trainee at Shimotsuki village, he was able to defeat all the other students except for the master's daughter Quina. A frustrated Zoro challenged Quina to a duel with real blades, but after a very fierce fight, he was defeated again even if he was using two swords. Then he made a promise with her to train harder so eventually one of them would become the world's greatest swordsman. Unfortunately, later Quina tragically died and her father gave Zoro her blade, which became his third. That day Zoro became determined to become the world's greatest swordsman to honor her memory. Inspired by the flashback, Zoro begins climbing the well until he manages to get out. Nearby, the Marines are taking Luffy away, and Helmeppo tells Kobe that Garp is only using him because of his connection to Luffy. Suddenly Luffy wakes up and pukes the poison on Helmeppo before telling Kobe about Kuro, only to be interrupted by Zoro, who immediately knocks out all of the officers except Kobe. Then Zoro and Luffy make their way back to the mansion, ignoring Kobe's weak attempt to arrest them. In the mansion, Kuro arrives at the abandoned room and the trio must hide. While Kuro destroys the furniture, Zoro and Luffy arrive and sneak inside, thanks to Zoro's strength. They split and Zoro comes across Sham and Butchie, triggering another fight. While Sham and Butchie are skilled, Zoro is still much better and quickly defeats them both. In the old room, Kaya and Nami try to attack Kuro together, only to get captured. Usopp gets him to drop them by shooting him with his slingshot, but Kuro dodges the projectiles and tries to strike Usopp back. He's stopped just in time by Luffy, who starts fighting Kuro and fails to land a single hit because Kuro is too fast. After Kuro scars Luffy's chest, Luffy gets an idea and freezes in the middle of the room to find Kuro's location by concentrating on the sound of his steps, allowing him to finally punch him. After exchanging a few more hits, Luffy captures Kuro's wrists and headbutts him, sending him flying through the window. Afterward, Kaya thanks the group by gifting them the ship Luffy wanted, and he names it the Going Merry to honor the dead lawyer. Luffy also invites Usopp to come with them, but he hesitates because he wants to take care of Kaya. However, Kaya tells him it's time to take care of herself and that she's leaving to study medicine. After she kisses him, Usopp agrees to join Luffy's crew. Kobe and Helmeppo return to Garp to report their failure. However, Garp is happy because he sees the Going Merry leaving the island. He immediately opens fire, and when Luffy uses a spyglass to check on the enemy, he shocks everyone by calling Garp Grandpa. Luffy starts remembering his childhood and how he kept saying he would become a pirate, but Garp would mistreat him and scold him, saying he had to become a marine. Garp keeps shooting cannonballs and Luffy tries to shoot back, but he fails at using the cannon. Garp tells them to surrender, and when Luffy refuses, Garp throws a cannonball with his own hands, only for Luffy to deflect it with his powers. This destroys the marine ship's sail, and Kobe pushes Helmeppo away before it gets him. This allows the Going Merry to escape by sailing into the fog. Sometime later, Garp calls the pirate Dracule, who is in the middle of a fight. Garp hires Dracule to hunt down Luffy, and Dracule accepts while defeating his enemies and cutting a ship in half. The enemy leader tries to shoot Dracule, but he cuts down the projectiles with his sword and quickly kills him. Garp's conversation is overheard by Corby, who asks Helmeppo about it. Helmeppo explains Dracule is one of the 7 warlords of the sea, who are pirates too powerful for the Marines to defeat, so they keep them close as useful allies. The warlords do dirty deeds for the Marines in secret, and in return their illegal deeds are ignored. Corby is against these strange morals and goes to talk to Garp about it, but Garp just tells him the world is unfair and Corby must learn to live with that. Meanwhile, Luffy smells food and tells Nami to sail in that direction, eventually finding a seagoing restaurant. While they get a table, in the kitchen Sanji is making a very fancy dish. However, the owner Zeph reminds him they don't do fancy here and sends Sanji to serve tables. On the main floor, two customers are having a fight, so Sanji quickly makes them stop by using his martial arts moves, which impresses Luffy. Sanji takes the group's order and soon they're eating great quantities of food, but Luffy is unable to pay the bill, so Zeph orders him to work as a chore boy for 1 year to pay off his debt. Luffy goes to the kitchen to start washing dishes and takes a taste of Sanji's dish. Meanwhile, Nami is tired of playing nice crew and makes a deal with a sailor to leave alone. Later during Sanji's break, Luffy tells him he loved his dish and asks him about his dream. Sanji explains he wants to find All Blue, the mythical ocean where the 4 seas of the world meet because he can find rare ingredients there. At that moment, the only survivor from Dracula's attack arrives in a bad condition and Sanji immediately feeds him even if he knows Zeph wouldn't approve because the man can't pay. Luffy is impressed again and invites Sanji to join his crew, but he turns him down because he owes Zeph. Soon Dracula also arrives at the restaurant and begins asking about Luffy. Recognizing him as the world's greatest swordsman, Zoro challenges Dracula to a duel at dawn. Meanwhile in the kitchen, Luffy calls Zeph out because he won't let Sanji have his dream and tells him Sanji fed the lost man, which impresses Zeph. The next morning, Nami steals the map and goes to meet the sailor, but she changes her mind and rejoins the others. The group then meets Dracula and the duel starts, but Dracula thinks Zoro is weak and starts fighting with only a small dagger, blocking all of his attacks. However, he's impressed by Zoro's strong will and takes out his actual sword, defeating Zoro in seconds and leaving him gravely wounded. Fascinated by the group, Dracula decides not to capture them and leaves. The group brings an unconscious Zoro inside the restaurant and Luffy asks for a doctor, but Zeph volunteers to treat the wound himself using his cooking skills. Meanwhile, Dracula meets with Garp and tells him he let Luffy go before reminding him he's the one in control, which is overheard by Kobe. After Dracula leaves, a furious Garp destroys his office. In the restaurant, Luffy asks Sanji how he met Zeph. It turns out Zeph used to be a pirate, and his crew attacked the ship where young Sanji was working as a cook. Zeph entered the kitchen and Sanji tried to stop him from touching the food, but at that moment, a huge wave sank the ship. Moments later, Sanji woke up to discover he and Zeph were stranded on a rock outcropping high above the sea. Zeph brought 2 bags of food from the ship and gave Sanji one, keeping the bigger one before sending the boy to the other side of the rock. Sanji rationed the food properly as days began to pass, eventually having to eat rotten bread. On day 25, Sanji saw a ship and yelled at it, but because of a storm he wasn't hurt. One day 70, Sanji was tired of being hungry and went to take the other bag, only to discover it was full of treasure. Zeph lied to him to save him and all this time he'd been keeping himself alive by eating his own leg. The duo was saved later on day 85. Sometime later, Arlong and his henchmen arrive at the restaurant. They storm in without permission and push people out of their seats before asking about Luffy, which is overheard by Nami. While Zeph tries to distract them with a meal, Nami rushes to warn Luffy, but he refuses to leave, wanting to defend the restaurant to thank Zeph for his help. Then Luffy goes to confront Arlong, who reveals he has Buggy's head in a bag. It turns out Buggy left an ear inside Luffy's hat, so they've been spying on them all this time. Arlong asks for the map and Luffy tells him to fight him for it, but Zeph interferes by trying to shoot Arlong. The bullet does nothing and Zeph is knocked down by the henchmen, so Sanji jumps in to start fighting them with his martial arts. Unfortunately he's defeated, so Luffy goes after Arlong next. However, Arlong is a fish man, which makes his body so strong that Luffy's punches do nothing. After throwing Luffy outside, Arlong begins beating him up, but before he can kill him, Nami shows up. She reveals she's been working for Arlong all along, proved by the tattoo on her shoulder, and she tells Arlong that she has the map. Arlong throws Luffy into the sea before leaving with Nami, but luckily Sanji rescues Luffy from drowning. Afterward, Sanji goes back into the restaurant where he has an argument with Zeph, who wants him to quit to pursue his dream. Luffy and Usopp return to their ship and discover Zoro is finally awake, so they get ready to go looking for Nami. Sanji joins them as the ship's cook, giving Zeph an emotional goodbye on his way out. Then Luffy reveals he's taken Buggy's head from Arlong and he's agreed to guide them to Arlong's headquarters because that way he can reunite with his body. Whenever Buggy gets too annoying, Zoro threatens to throw the head into the water or locks him in a barrel. Meanwhile, Nami follows Arlong and his men back to the Konami Islands, where there are Arlong's headquarters and Buggy's body. This is also where Nami grew up, and being here brings back memories of her childhood with her adoptive mother Belmere and her adoptive sister. Nami always had a love for maps and navigation, but they couldn't afford books, so one day Nami stole one. When Belmere caught her, she scolded her for it, and Nami cried saying she hated being poor and that Belmere wasn't her real mother, which earned her a slap. To apologize, Belmere told her the story of how she used to be a marine, and after a fierce fight against a band of pirates, she found the 2 scared girls. That day she knew the right thing to do was to stay home and raise them. Then Belmere made her return the book, but the local sheriff didn't punish her. Instead, he promised to get her books in the future in exchange for chores. That day, Arlong and his crew came to raid the village, destroying everything in their path and hurting the sheriff. Back to the present, Nami gives the map to Arlong, who sends her to the village to collect the monthly tribute. Soon Luffy's group arrives at Konami Island 2 and discovers the whole place has been destroyed by Arlong. They watch how Nami comes by to pick up the tribute, although the villagers don't have enough to pay. The only one who stands up against her is her sister Nojiko, who spits on the ground before leaving. After taking the money, Nami notices Luffy and the others and tells them to get out because she doesn't need their help. Once she leaves, Luffy announces he's not giving up and goes to find Nojiko to demand answers. Nojiko meets the group with a weapon, but Sanji calms her down by offering to cook for her. Impressed by the meal, Nojiko tells them the rest of the story. When the pirates arrived at the village, Belmere hid his daughters in the basement before Arlong came by to ask for tribute. Belmere only paid for one person, however Arlong noticed 3 dishes on the table and attacked Belmere to demand more. The girls immediately came out to defend their mom, then Belmere told Arlong that the money would count as the girls' tribute. Since she couldn't pay for herself, Arlong killed her. After hearing this story, Luffy is even more sure that Nami can't be bad and something is going on. Meanwhile, Nami returns to Arlong, who is having a party. She wants to talk about their deal, but they're suddenly interrupted by Marine Captain Nezumi, who has come to pick the usual bribe that will make him ignore Arlong's crimes. Nami overhears it all, and after Nezumi leaves with his money, she tells Arlong she's finally got enough cash to end their deal, and Arlong accepts. However, after Nami leaves to retrieve the money, Arlong sends Nezumi after her. Then Nami goes to her mother's grave to dig out a chest full of all the things she's stolen through the years. Nojiko finds her and calls her out for disrespecting their mother, so Nami finally confesses the truth. After their mother's death, Nami went to see Arlong, and they made a deal. Arlong would sell the village back to her for 100 million, and in exchange, Nami became his cartographer. Nojiko finally understands that Nami has been trying to save the village all along, and the sisters reconcile, only to suddenly be interrupted by Nezumi, who confiscates Nami's treasure because it's stolen property. Since Nezumi knows exactly the amount of money she has, Nami realizes Arlong sent him to prevent her from liberating the village. She begins running back, but she falls and has a breakdown during which she destroys her tattoo while thinking of the time the henchman gave it to her. At that moment Luffy finds her, and after giving her his hat, he and the others promise to help. Meanwhile, Arlong gives a speech to his pirates and encourages them to destroy the village, which soon catches on fire. By the time the group gets there, there's nothing left, but Nojiko shows up with all the villagers, who have learned the truth and want to fight too. However, Luffy asks them to leave everything to them. At the marine ship, Nezumi meets with Garp and tells him Luffy's location. Moments later, Luffy's crew arrives at Arlong's headquarters. While Luffy and Nami sneak inside to recover the map, the others begin fighting the henchmen. Usopp battles against Chu, who chases him into the forest. Chu attacks Usopp by spitting alcohol at him as fast projectiles. However, Usopp shoots his bottle of alcohol with an incendiary projectile, causing it to explode and defeat him. Meanwhile, Zoro and Sanji battle against the other henchmen in the common area and release Buggy's head so he can help them. However, as soon as he gets his body back, Buggy runs away. At that moment, Kurobe arrives and attacks using Fishman Karate, easily defeating Zoro after a few hits. Sanji decides to reveal his black leg style and fights Kurobe too, managing to beat him up. Inside, Luffy and Nami find the map, only to be confronted by Arlong, who lands his blade on Luffy's shoulder. Luffy immediately breaks it and tells Nami to get out so he can start fighting Arlong. Luffy manages to punch his mouth, but Arlong's teeth instantly grow again. Like last time, Luffy's punches aren't strong enough to hurt Arlong, so he decides to start destroying the building instead. As the walls start to crumble, Luffy attacks Arlong with a few punches and then uses a technique to drag him through several floors, causing the building to collapse. The group outside is worried about Luffy, but he soon emerges from the debris announcing his victory. In the evening, the village has a party to celebrate their freedom. The party is suddenly interrupted by the Marines and Garp orders them to arrest Luffy's group. Kobe and Helmeppo refuse to follow orders, so Garp goes after Luffy himself and starts a fight. A fierce battle ensues, but Luffy can't defeat Garp, who quickly picks up and tells him to give up. Luffy refuses to abandon his dream and laughs, reminding Garp of Gold Roger's execution. Suddenly Garp lets go of Luffy and laughs too before telling his men to arrest Arlong's men instead. It's revealed that Garp has been testing Luffy to make sure he's ready, so now he can leave knowing his grandson is safe. The next morning, Nami says goodbye to her mother's grave and her sister, and it's revealed that Nojiko gave her a new tattoo to cover the old one. Before leaving, Kobe visits Luffy and shows him that upon Nezumi's request, Luffy has been given a bounty of 30 million, the highest in East Blue. While this accomplishment is noticed by his friends and enemies across the sea, the group finally accepts they're a true crew and sails away. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.